Welcome to my overview of the Frequency Central Waverunner. Waverunner is a clockable LFO with a built-in clock divider. It also has an output for this divided clock. It also has a level input for externally attenuating the LFO signal. It has 8 LFO waveforms you can choose from, and it also has a distort knob which tilts or distorts the wave. Waverunner has a really wide frequency range. It goes from extremely slow to about 50 Hz. A clocked LFO is a really useful tool to have, and they're not the same as a synced LFO. Where a synced LFO only resets its phase when it receives a sync signal, a clocked LFO calculates the tempo from an incoming signal. Sometimes it takes a few triggers for it to catch up. Let me start off with some sound examples, and after that we'll have a closer look to all the features Frequency Central Waverunner has to offer. let's get started. What we're listening right now is the even output of Generate 3 going into a filter, and the Waverunner is controlling the frequency of the cutoff. Waverunner is receiving a clock signal from Pamela and is the top trace on 0 scope. The LFO output is going through the 0 scope and it's the bottom trace. The distort knob is completely to the left and we're on a ramp wave. So let me turn this to the center. And you can see how it's just a ramp. The clock coming in from Pamela is divided by 2. Actually, this isn't a clock divider, it's a clock multiplier, but when we multiply by a half, it's the same as a division by 2. So let me put this to 1, so it's synchronized to the clock coming in. And as you can see on the scope, the tempo of the LFO is exactly the same as the incoming clock. There's 2 jacks, by the way. The bottom one is called clock, but this is sending the multiplied clock from the Waverunner itself. The clock from Pamela is going into the sync input, which is the top jack. I have braids connected to the clock output of the Waverunner, so we can hear the multiplied clock from the Waverunner a little bit better. There's also a LED indicating what the internal clock of Waverunner is, and this is after the multiplication. Let's add a kick drum, and the kick drum follows the tempo coming in from Pamela. This is the kick drum, so this is the tempo I'm sending into the Waverunner. So right now the incoming clock and the kick drum and the LFO and the drum sound from braids are all at the same tempo because the multiplication factor is 1. So let me change that. So now we're at 1.5 multiplications. It's really useful to have the multiplied clock from the Waverunner as a separate output, because right now I'm just triggering a drum so we can hear better what the internal clock of Waverunner is. But you can just as well use this to sync another LFO or perhaps clock a second Waverunner at a different speed. Let's go to 2. And as you can see on the scope, sometimes it needs a moment to calculate the tempo or to catch up. Let's go to 3. And 4. Which is the last setting, it's the fastest it can multiply the clock coming in. So let's get back to 1. I'll briefly go over the 8 different waves. So there's a saw wave, I'll mute braids for a moment. Well, let's make this a little more interesting. So there's the saw wave, which we can distort. To the left makes it a shorter peak. And to the right gives it an extra bump into the positive range. Then we have the ramp wave. We already listened to this. To the left, it goes more into the positive. So this might be really useful for side chaining. When we turn it to the right, it gets a little more snappy. Okay, so the square wave. When we distort this to the left, it gets narrower. Almost like a trigger. And when we distort this to the right, it's almost a gate. So next up there's a triangle. Let me change up the sound a little bit. So there's a triangle wave, which we can tilt also with the distort knob to the left. It becomes a ramp. To the right, it becomes a saw. And anything in between, of course, as you can see. So then there's the sine wave. Which we can tilt also to the left. It becomes a ramp-like sine. And it sounds really nice on this patch. And to the right, it becomes almost a saw wave. So there's the noise wave. When we turn the distort knob to the left, it doesn't really change that much. When we turn it to the right, you can see on the scope. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit. How this really changes the output from bipolar to more unipolar. Then there's the sample and hold wave, indicated by an S on the front panel. We zoom out again. So this is just what you expect from a sample and hold. Now when we turn it to the left, not a lot happens, but when we turn it to the right, just as the noise, the sample and hold becomes positive, and it just cycles between 0 and 5 volts, essentially becoming digital bits. 0 or 1, off or on. Let me turn up the multiplication rate. Then we have one last wave, and that's the stepped triangle. Let me turn down the multiplication factor to 0.5. You can clearly see how this wave is stepped. can be useful for sounds like this, but you could also use this to send out pitch. Let me try it. Of course, this is not attenuated, so it goes the full range. You can also distort or tilt this wave. So to the left it becomes a stepped ramp, and to the right it becomes a stepped saw wave. The blue cable here is a gate signal coming from PAM. It's twice as fast as the clock signal coming from PAM, which I am using to sync Waverunner to. So let's plug it in to the level input of Waverunner and listen to what happens. Let me use this signal from Waverunner to control the cutoff of the filter once more. And let's use another wave. I really think the sine tilted to the left sounded really nice on this patch. And as you can see, whenever the Waverunner receives a gate, it will open, and when it receives nothing, it won't send out any control voltage to whatever you're using it for. So right now it's the filter cutoff, and when Waverunner is not receiving anything into the level input, it just doesn't send out anything. Let me remove it. So this is without using the level input, and this is with. Of course, you could use something else than a gate to send into the level input of the Waverunner. So now I'm sending in a cycled envelope from Mats. What this is really useful for is to create a delayed LFO. Let me patch it up so you can hear what I mean. So now you can hear, by sending in an envelope from Mats to the level input of the Waverunner, how we can create a vibrato that's delayed or that swells in time. And the envelope coming from Mats is just attenuating whatever Waverunner sends out. This is the fastest it will go, by the way. And the slowest it can go is 0.025 Hertz, which is really slow. Take in mind I'm using the clock output from Waverunner to trigger braids, but Waverunner is no longer clocked to Pamela, so it's free running. This concludes my overview of the Frequency Central Waverunner. I think a clocked LFO is a really useful tool to have. There aren't that many clocked LFO modules out there. And if you don't have one in your rack, I think it's worth taking a look at the Waverunner, because a clocked LFO opens up a lot of possibilities, and the built-in multiplier and the chord and clock output make this module even more interesting. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.